In terms of having a bet, I see it's 12 to 1 the field in the Supreme, perhaps the 20s.
Hello and welcome along to the Let's Talk Racing YouTube channel in association with Racing TV. We've got a special guest on this video. We've got Gavin Lynch to join the channel for a pre-season chat. Andrew, excited?
We're very excited. We had Gavin over last year in London in a pub and we've got him back again.
We do, absolutely. Gavin, how are you doing?
Yeah, good lads, good to see you again. No disco music this year, so we'll just have to talk about horses and no dancing and no...
There were plenty of comments slightly complaining about the audio. I think that was my fault, to be honest. But hopefully this time around, there's no music and everything can go smoothly enough. If you do enjoy this video, please hit that like button. And brilliant for Cheltenham Racecourse to get on board with the channel. If you are an 18 to 28-year-old and you do want to go racing this season, get involved in the offer that they're doing, £290, and you can go to all of the 16 race days, including the festival. The festival alone costs £417 to go, club enclosure. That doesn't include the members stand or the members bar. So if you do want to go racing, it's well worthwhile. And if you're going to go regularly, then do make sure you make the most of the value that is offered. Anyway, let's kick off. And we've got a couple of topics, big topics, Gavin, going into this season that we want to talk about. It'll be a general discussion between all of us. First of all, we have to talk about the changes that Cheltenham have. I think there's no official confirmation, but the Racing Post reported that the Turners and the cross country are a number of changes that might come down the line. The Turners will lose its grade 1 status. That's going to go back to a novice handicap chase, which I really did like. And then the cross country will revert to a handicap as well that we see throughout the season at the Cheltenham December meeting and whatnot. What was your initial reaction to this?
My initial reaction is mixed. Look at it; it's not the end of the world. It's, people can get very excited on Twitter about these things, but I think it's definitely going to make the Arkle a better race. I prefer if they got rid of the National Hunt Chase. I just don't see the point of that race anymore. I know it's very historic. It's one of the oldest, if not the oldest race at the Cheltenham Festival. I think if you got rid of the National Hunt Chase and kept the Turners, I think overall the Brown Advisory will be a better race, because with the 3-6 gone. But with the Turners gone, yes, the Arkle's going to be a lot better. The Brown Advisory would be better as well because you're keeping the National Hunt Chase. But I just feel sorry for horses who are, horses that win, say the Gallaghers or what used to be the Ballymore. For those going chasing, the perfect race really for a Gold Cup horse who has a bit of class is the Turners 2.5 mile race. And I just feel that I think we're missing a little bit, but, we'll get on with it. And as I said, the Arkle will be a better race and so will the Brown Advisory.
What did you think of it?
Yeah, I'd agree. I think if I was to have amendments to any of those novices chases, it would have had to have been the National Hunt Chase. Personally, it's become a bit of a benefit for, you've horses in there that are second season novices at times, which I don't agree with. I think the cross country is a very good option, bringing it back to a handicap. It's come into a bit of a kind of Gold Cup benefit over the last few years. Like, I don't really see how you can have horses running, in kind of Lexus chases and Irish Gold Cups, and then they'll rock up in a cross country of level weights with a horse that's rated 130, 140. Hopefully that will bring the likes of, you see a Punchestown, the likes of a Singing Banjo being able to win some of those cross country races. It might bring a few more stories to that race.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with what you said, Gavin, with the National Hunt Chase. You look at Statler, Gallard and Manil, who else would possibly Corbett's Cross, you'd have said would have been a real contender in a 3 mile Brown Advisory. So with those horses going to the 3 mile race, I think it would be a positive, but it looks like they're not going to touch the National Hunt Chase for now on. But I do think there are going to be more updates. I'm hearing it's roughly the 26th of September, which we'll hear more about officially from Cheltenham.
I was just going to say, it's amazing that the cross country chase, I think it's a better idea if it goes to a handicap. But what would have been very interesting last March was that Delta Work, Galvin and Manel Indo, they finished 2nd, 3rd and 4th in the Grand National. They were almost the same weights, give or take. They were getting £2, giving £2, etc. But there was only a length covering the three of them. So it actually would have been a brilliant race last March, only for the fact that it was called off, So
it would have been a brilliant race. I would wonder whether connections of those really classy horses that were running in those races will now possibly sidestep a cross country if they are thinking of the Grand National, because they're going to have to give a lot of horses a lot of weight, possibly.
Yeah, I'd say you could be right. Like, don't forget that those horses are 11, 11 and 10. So if they're getting on a bit, it depends how many weeks are between Cheltenham and Aintree. But as you said, if you're going to give away a stone or two around Cheltenham, perhaps it's not the ideal prep that it has been for the Grand National in the past.
Absolutely. On the other end of the spectrum, we've got an exciting horse in Ballyburn who won the Gallaghers last year. He went to Punchestown and was very impressive. This year, people are talking about champion hurdles with him. I think Willie mentioned it after the Gallaghers last year. To me, personally, I think that he will go chasing. I wonder what you think, Gavin.
Yeah, I'd say it's probably 80% sure that he will go chasing. He's a 6-year-old, so he's going to be a novice chaser at 7. Like, you can't go end up with a Gold Cup later than 8 years for your first Gold Cup, really. So I think if he's going to go that way, I think he'll go chasing. Willie already has statement and Losimount perhaps for the champion hurdle. So I'd imagine he'll go chasing. And I was just looking through, people are wondering maybe which race Ballyburn. I think he definitely would have went for the Turners personally, but maybe I'm wrong. We'll never know. But I think that Willie has fallen out of love a little bit with the Brown Advisory. If you look at his last 3 winners of the race, Factifile, I don't think that was Willie's first option. I think that the owner, JP, wanted him to run there. Willie wanted to run him in the Turners. But his previous 3 winners, Monkfish, after winning the RSA, I think, was 1 for 7 after that race. Don Poley in 2015 was 2 from 12 after the RSA. And Cooldine back in 2009 was 0 from 14 since after his runs after the RSA. So I don't think Willie Mullins loves the Brown Advisory so much. And I would imagine Ballyburn, like, he was quick enough to win the Grade 1 at the DRF by 7 lengths from Slade Steele. So he definitely has the gears. That time was very quick that day as well. So I would imagine it's odds on that he'll go for the Arkle if he goes.
Yeah, that does seem to be probably the more likely option. Would you have any concerns? I suppose in the back of my mind, he was so impressive in the Gallagher. Form of that race, though, is very much open to debate. The horses in behind have kind of fluffed their lines since. Is there, I suppose in the back of my mind, there's a little bit of lukewarm that maybe, was that all a little bit flattered?
Perhaps, but I suppose really he's always had this air that he's going to be a great horse. And if you go back, I suppose his best performance classification-wise was in the DRF, beating Slade Steele, who goes on to win the Supreme. And Slade Steele, if Ballyburn had ended up in the Supreme, Slade Steele would have went to the Ballymore. But as you say, the Ballymore itself, Jimmy Desai, A Little Antique, Mercury, and Predator's Gold did the form no good since. But he could only beat what's in front of him. He's bolted up except for first him out, perhaps when he wasn't fit and fair years behind a good horse. And then not particularly impressive in Punchestown, gets the job done. But he just does have a swagger. He's got this low head carriage. The thing that I suppose annoys me a little bit with the Turners being gone is that he's definitely a keen going horse. He has 1 over 2, 2.5. So let's say that they bring him back to the Arkle next March. And let's say he keeps winning. The problem you have there is if your ultimate aim is the Gold Cup, you're training a horse to go at a fast speed. He's going to stay keen. They were very, very lucky, not lucky, but they were brilliant with the handling of Galopin Des Champs. He was very, very keen in his first season over fences. So the second season, when he won his first Gold Cup, they held him up a lot to get him settled. And then last year, because he became so settled, they were actually able to ride him up at the pace a lot more, which suited him even more so. But I just wonder, I don't think it's ideal. Now, in the past 10, 15, 20 years ago, you'd Kicking King and all those horses that ran well in Arkles, and that didn't stop them winning a Gold Cup. But I just wonder, it's not perhaps ideal for a horse that's quite keen to end up going back to 2 miles when 12 months later you want to perhaps win over 3 miles too, that's all.
It's also probably important to note that Willie's got Mystical Power, who you would likely say will go down the champion hurdle route, and therefore that's another reason why they wouldn't probably use Ballyburn there if they got Losimouth, State Man and Mystical Power. I'd be probably 99% confident he'll go chasing. The one obviously issue that Willie's got now is do you drop him down to 2 and drop him down to 3, and that's what you talked about. He's also got Impere Pass, who doesn't seem like a horse who's not quick. He looks like he's going chasing as well. If he was to go chasing, could he dictate where possibly Ballyburn goes? In my head, I would think Impere Pass would drop down to 2 and Ballyburn would possibly go up to 3.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think if the Turners were still there, well, then they would have separated into the 2.5. Impere Pass has loads of gears. He didn't start particularly well last season, finished very well, as we know, in Aintree and Sandown. But I don't see him going 3 miles, and I don't see Ballyburn going 3 miles. So I think perhaps they could end up in the Arkle. So people that are glad to see the Turners gone, they'll be clapping their hands because you're going to see a really good Arkle this year. So look, there's two sides to every argument, but I'd imagine, I don't know if either of those will end up in the Brown Advisory, personally speaking.
I suppose there's also that one little nag that, like, people at this stage of the season are going to be very happy maybe that the Turners is going. I could see a situation though where you get a horse like Impere Pass potentially that ends up skipping Cheltenham because he has to go and run at Aintree or Fairyhouse. I suspect Fairyhouse with their 2.5 mile Grade 1 novice chase are absolutely licking their lips there, because you're going to have a number of horses that are going to be completely between two stools at Cheltenham.
Absolutely. All right. If I had to say that, what would you predict Ballyburn, the Cheltenham Festival race he'll run in, is?
I think he'll run in the Arkle because I agree with Gavin. I think he'll go down in trip, but I personally believe he could be vulnerable in an Arkle.
Gavin, do you think Arkle?
I think he'll probably go to the Arkle, yeah. The point that Andrew makes about Imperial Pass skipping Cheltenham, particularly if Willie is going particularly well for the British trainers, perhaps he might sidestep Cheltenham, which is something Willie has never, ever done until this point. But perhaps he'd be forced into that either to Fairyhouse or to Aintree. So I'd imagine Ballyburn at the moment, you'd guess that perhaps he'll go the Arkle. But look, the stable tours are going to come out there in the next month or two, and you're going to hear 2 or 3 different solutions to that one, I'd say.
I agree. I could see Ballyburn starting over maybe 2-1. I think there's that race at Navan.
Yeah.
And I could just see him running in the flow gas at the DRF. And if he goes that way, I could only see him going up rather than down from there. I don't know. The Gold Cup picture looks fascinating. You mentioned Galopin Des Champs before. He's going back for a hat-trick of wins in the Gold Cup. It would be an incredible achievement if he's able to do that. Can he?
I think he can. The stats, I'm always against an older horse. He's turning 9. It just shows you that he won his first Gold Cup at 7. So I'm always amazed why horses end up in bumpers at 5 and 6 and stuff, because I think they should be running Gold Cups at 7 if they're good enough. But just to say, I have a couple of stats here for you. In the last 21 years, 5 horses at the age of 9 have won the Gold Cup. Best Mate, Cato Star, Imperial Commander, Synchronized and Don Cossack. So the stats aren't against it. As regards Galopin Des Champs, if you look at him since the Martin Pipe, going left-handed, he's 8 from 8. If you include, that's obviously including the fall in the Turners where he would have won by 20 lengths, we'd say, or 15 lengths, whatever. But as we know, he jumped the last fence perfect and then just kind of couldn't get the landing gear out. But if you don't count that as a loss, he is literally unbeaten going left-handed. His last 3 runs going right-handed, he's lost too fast or slow. He's also the same age. He's 8 turning 9. I'm just very surprised that Galopin Des Champs is 7-2 and Factified is 4-1. I'd have a far bigger gap between those two. And then I see that one particular bookmaker is going 12-1 fast or slow, which, like, to me, he had a very, very soft unseat in the Gold Cup. I think he's a class act. Even though he did unseat, he's a fantastic jumper. So is Galopin Des Champs. The fact that they're both turning 9 is a slight negative. The starts aren't too bad. So I think, like, if you look at it, in his last 8 runs going left-handed, he hasn't even remotely got near to being defeated, has he?
No.
I think he's the best staying chaser since Cato Star. I think everybody agrees on that. In the last 12 or 14 years, he's a proper 180 horse. Factify was very impressive in the Brown Advisory. I don't know if it was the strongest race ever, but for me to jump from that up to beating Galopin Des Champs, I think it's a big step.
Do you think because Galopin Des Champs is getting older that we could see possibly a slightly different route to the Gold Cup? Now, he's had 9 runs in the last 2 seasons, all in Grade 1s. That is going to be putting miles on the clock at some point. Maybe could Willie look at it and have one day in mind in March and do almost an album photo and kind of preserve them all year and use the factor files of the world, maybe the Grange Clare West, Iron Maximus. I suppose his rating has put him into a Gold Cup picture. He's going to be forced to run in Grade 1s at least. Do you think that we could see a slight different route to the Gold Cup as a result of his age?
Perhaps. I don't think he'll go just to Tramore now necessarily, but I think perhaps would he go the John Durkin in 1 run at Leopardstown? I'm not sure, but 3 runs before Cheltenham last year seemed to be a negative, but it didn't seem to matter. And the great thing about him is it doesn't really matter with tactics. I think he'll be up with in the van this year. At Punchestown, they probably got the tactics slightly wrong, but I don't think he's as good going right-handed. He's not as good at the end of the season. And the great thing about him is it makes no difference about the ground as well. Like the ground on the Friday at Cheltenham this year was heavy, but he's won on all types of ground. I think he's set a massive standard.
You mentioned there with Factor File as a slight, I suppose, slight concern maybe over the validity of the form at Cheltenham in the Brown Advisory. It was a small runner race. It wasn't very quickly ran. He's obviously been very, very impressive in all of his novice chase starts last year, but he does seem to be a bit of a wise guy's horse for the Gold Cup here. When you look at the bare form, as you say, in comparison to the likes of a Fast or Slow, he's got an awful lot to find.
Yeah, look, he's very exciting. He's been brilliant. It was actually a great thing to see Willie skipping a hurdles campaign with him because of his age. I'm always surprised that it worked so well for Florida Pearl back a long, long time ago, but Willie's hardly ever done it since. So it definitely worked. It was a great idea. I think he's a super horse. The RSA form is good. I wouldn't complain too much about it, but I just think, if anything, Galopin Des Champs after 2 Gold Cup wins is slightly underestimated, perhaps. That's all.
It's mad, isn't it, that he's underestimated after 2 Gold Cup wins. The Champion Hurdle is another interesting division. We've got a couple of horses who need to return in Constitution Hill. He's an absolute superstar. We've also got Sergino. What will he do for Nicky Henderson's team? I was actually at Seven Barrows last Wednesday, saw Constitution Hill. He looked very, very well. Nicky was very, very pleased with him. But on the topic of Sergino, which I was really keen to ask him, he kind of said, you know what, we're going to wait until Constitution Hill returns. He did mention that the Holdings Hurdle at the October meeting, as well as the Elite Hurdle at Wincanton, as possible targets if they were to make that decision sooner. But I get the impression Sergino's plan this season largely revolves around, is Constitution Hill the force that he was before the injury? How do you look at the Champion Hurdle picture from a betting point of view? Are you interested in Lossiemouth? Are you interested in State Man because he's been there, he's reliable, but he has fallen short to Constitution Hill in a convincing manner when we last saw him? How it's a really tricky one.
It is. The first thing is I'd be dead against Sergino and Majbra. Like, for example, only one 5-year-old in the last 16 years won it, which was Esport Delaine in 2019. And similarly in the Arkle, I think it's not 0 from 18 since Viper Steady's won it, getting some weight back then. So I'd be against the 5-year-olds. Only 2 5-year-olds won at the Cheltenham Festival this year out of 27 races, which was the Bumper, which is often won by 5-year-olds. And Lossiemouth was the other one. But she was a class apart. She was just a superstar in the Mayor's race. So I suppose really for Lossiemouth to go to the Champion Hurdle, I think Willie would want to think that the Mayor's Hurdle is kind of semi in the bag, with whether it be a Jade Grugy or one of those Cargies or something. So that's obviously very relevant. Constitution Hill is as good a hurdler as I've seen, but the fact that, you know, he worked poorly in Kempton and then his bloods were wrong, but then he didn't make Punchestown, it just...
Wind up as well.
Sorry?
Wind up as well. How do you read into that?
Wind up, I don't like wind ups. I don't. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you're talking about the top level here. You're not talking about a grade 3 or a grade 2. The problem with backing Constitution Hill or finding out is we won't find out till March, because he'll probably bolt up in Newcastle. He'll probably bolt up in Kempton in average races. I know the grade 1s, but they won't be strong race. He'll be 5s on or whatever. So the fact then you won't find out until Cheltenham. Statement is not as good as Constitution Hill as we found out 2 years ago, but he's obviously very, very good. Will Lossiemouth go there? So there's lots of little bit of questions here and there. I don't see how you could have a strong opinion, or you could have a large bet at the minute. I think you'd have to wait. But I'd be dead set against Majbra and Sergino in a Champion Hurdle this year as 5-year-olds.
It's interesting. You were a massive fan of State Man. How do you look at this year's Champion Hurdle picture? Do you go with him because he's solid, or do you think take away from Constitution Hill, could Lossiemouth win a Champion Hurdle?
But potentially, yeah. No, I'm just a big fan of State Man because I think he gets slightly underrated, obviously, because he was beaten by Constitution Hill. I think people like to throw stones at him as a result, but yet he's the only horse in the last number of years that keeps coming to the well in grade 1s. He's doing what Hurricane Fly was doing and running 5 races a season, all grade 1s, and winning at least 4 of them. The problem for Willie Mullins is that I think the only track that a Lossiemouth could beat State Man at is Cheltenham. So do you just run them separately, and then potentially, as you say, as Gavin said, if they have a Jade Grugy who might be an odds-on favourite for a Mayor's Hurdle without Lossiemouth, do you just run her and hope for the best? Like, if they were to run around Leopardstown, I think State Man beats her all day long, but I'm not sure State Man is as good at Cheltenham, and that provides that little bit of indecision when it comes to Lossiemouth involved.
What do you think?
Yeah. The point you make about Stapeman and Cheltenham, obviously he won the county hurdle, but that was off 140, I think, from memory. His worst run really over hurdles was when he was second, hammered by Constitution Hill, and even in this year's champion hurdle, he wasn't visually overly impressive, as you say. He's brilliant on Leopardstown. So the question you have as well is, if the two of them, will they be kept apart? If they're both undefeated, you'd imagine Paul will probably stay on Lossiemouth, but again, you couldn't be maybe certain on that. But look, there's going to be lots of ups and downs in the champion hurdle market, I think, between now and March.
Yeah, I think he would stay on Lossiemouth as well, because I think he knows that if Constitution Hill is back at his best, that Stateman can't beat him because they've done it before.
I always think, though, with Townend, he's so reluctant to get away from, like, he could have done that in the past with Album Photo, and yet he always stuck with him. You know, he loves the one that's won the big race.
I think he'd stay on Stateman. Sorry if I said the opposite.
Yeah, no, I think, I'm not sure. I look into it, and Stateman's rated 169. Lossiemouth is 156. Obviously, the £7 mare's allowance, this Stateman's still £6 superior. But Lossiemouth's not been off the bridle. She's so good around Cheltenham. I personally would back Lossiemouth to beat Stateman around Cheltenham, and I think it'd be interesting if they were to meet before. The champion bumper form next. The bumper form that we always tend to look at as you look at the novice hurdles. Jasmine Devois went to Punchestown disappointed. So did Romeo Coolio. Jalon Duderies in their redemption day is remarkably a 7-year-old going novice hurdling this season, it would look like. You've also got Jeroboam Machan, who didn't go to the champion bumper. That bumper form last year looks pretty difficult to read because they all didn't particularly perform at the top level afterwards. How do you feel about that? Yeah,
look, the champion bumper form, I always think it's something it's a bit of a bugbear of mine when you see people on Twitter, because you'll have people banging on that the horse that finished 12th in the champion bumper wins a maiden hurdle around Newton Abbot, and everyone says that the form is great then. You know, like, you'd like to hope these horses go and win maiden hurdles. It's an odd look to it. I was a little bit underwhelmed with Jalon Duderies in the race, I must say, because I went into the race thinking he was, you know, he looked a solid horse. He looked like he had the best form on paper. He ran a very good race, but I think slight, you know, limitations were exposed.
I think he'll go up in trip this year.
Yeah, I'd say so. I was disappointed that Redemption Day won the Grade 1 at Punchestown. I'm not discrediting Tim O'Driscoll, who's obviously put an awful lot into the game. I can understand the reasons why it's happened, but how a horse that's, you know, I think it was his 3rd year of bumpers was winning a Grade 1. I don't know, just the whole thing didn't sit well with me, and I'm not sure it was a great feeling for how good the actual bumper crop were.
In terms of having a bet, I see it's 12 to 1 the field in the Supreme, it's 12 to 1 the field in the Gallaghers, and it's the same horses, and it's 16 to 1 in the race that's an absolute nightmare for punters every single year, more or less, is the Bartlett. Last year, again, a 33 to 1 winner. Look, I think very, very difficult to have a bet. If it's a case that last year's bumper crop were average, perhaps Saturday or Monday at 20 to 1 for the Supreme. I was saying earlier, I don't like 5-year-olds. That's an open company. But if you've got a horse who ran Sergino very, very close on debut in Otay, second one ever was in the Triumph, finished 6th, I think, beaten 17 lengths maybe, and then goes and wins at 12 to 1 on in Tipperary by 60 lengths, but at least it shows that it's alive there last May. Perhaps Salvatore Monday at 20s, because that's not a bumper horse. It's open to a lot of improvement. It's a second season of it. Maybe that. But I think probably hand in the pocket time and just wait till you get to around Christmas time.
Interesting.
Well, I felt, and it was very disappointing. He obviously got injured. I thought the single-handedly best bumper performance of the year was Jeroboam Machan at Leopardstown. But I don't know what the story is with him. He seemed to have a pretty bad injury after that.
How do you feel about William Money?
Yeah, look, he was very impressive at Naas, certainly on his second start. That form, you know, even with Royal Hollow over the summer, looks a little bit better now. He was a little bit disappointing at Punchestown, but he was tracking Jasmine Devoe and Romeo Coolio. I think Finney Maguire would have been within his rights to think they were going to take him into the race, and the two of them fell on his lap turning in, and therefore it was a bit of a mess. He got behind, Barry Connell's come out and said the only kind of target is the Supreme Novices Hurdle. We know Barry's a very bullish man when it comes to good horses. He'd have to find a little bit, but I suppose, as you see, for so many years, I suppose we've given out that the Supreme Novices is 4-1 the field in September. It's actually probably pretty refreshing that it's open.
Yeah, absolutely. JP McManus has got an interesting one this season with 1 million runners, it would seem, that could run in Grade 1 3-mile chases. Well, obviously, we know him for having lots of quality, but I do think there's been a massive shift of the last couple of years towards quality rather than quantity. He usually has 5 or 6 with many, many trainers over in Ireland. Really likes to support the little man in racing as well, which is a wonderful thing. But with the shift towards quality and the more money spent on individual horses has meant that he's in a situation this year where he could have 5 horses who could feature in Grade 1 races over 3 miles. Now, I'm going to quickly ask both of you at the start, before we kind of get an overview of what you think, of where you think that these might pitch up come the spring. I Am Maximus, the Grand National winner, is now rated 169, forces him into Grade 1s. Gavin, do you think that he's going to go down the Gold Cup route?
I'd say it'll be a case of perhaps he might run at Christmas and then they'll see, and depending on his performances, which is an obvious statement, but even though he's £10 higher than he was at Aintree, you would still imagine that that would be more of the goal than the Champion or the Gold Cup, considering as well that JP has so many. Now, it is £10 more, but and he's not a good jumper, but the Aintree Grand National is not so much about jumping anymore. So I would imagine that the main target will be that. And I don't know how many days it is between the Gold Cup and the Grand National, but I would say in their heads they're more 70-30 towards the Grand National.
Yeah, I tend to agree myself, and I think with JP and Willie Mullins, they've got an awful lot more of a Gold Cup horse. In fact, to file, really, I suspect I can't see him not being campaigned as a Gold Cup horse. I suspect he'll take in those Leopardstown races, and I suppose of the 5 that we're probably going to talk about from JP, he is the one, as the market would suggest, I know, but he is definitely the one that would hold the most credentials, I feel, for a Gold Cup.
Corbett's Cross, Gavin, won the National Hunt Chase last year. In my head, not before I looked at the ratings, I thought this is going to be one that Emmett Mullins is going to have a quiet time with and turn up at the National and be 5-1 favourite. He's rated 166. It's going to be some effort to get him down to a mark where he's really, really competitive. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, but even if he did have 2 or 3 bad runs, I can't see the handicappers really dropping him at all. So I don't think that really is necessarily overly viable. His jumping at the start of the season wasn't particularly hot, but he jumped perfectly well in the National Chase. I suppose you have to say he ran a cracker in Aintree. He was taking on the older horses, more experienced once he was a novice. Is he as good as Factified at the moment? You'd probably say not, but certainly you'd love to own him anyway.
And then the 2 horses who could, well, have both won Grade 1s, but could possibly go down the handicap route, I was thinking, is I know the way you're thinking, who won the Kim Muir. He's rated 157. To me, he'd look like an Irish National or a Grand National horse, possibly off that sort of mark. And then Spillans Tower, who's 155. But then they're both classy horses in their own right, so it's still hard to imagine them running in those big handicaps. What do you think about I know the way you're thinking in Spillans Tower?
Thankfully, I know the way you're thinking one at Cheltenham because it was getting a bit scary there at one stage. But Derek O'Connor, I thought, was absolutely amazing all week. Just, I always thought Derek was brilliant, but I think he's extra brilliant after last March. He was a bit unlucky then in the Hunter's Chase as well when the winning jockey switched to the outside because Derek tried to block him up the inside. But I know the way you're thinking. His jumping early on in the Kim Muir was not good. His jumping in Aintree was a little bit scratchy, but better. He has a massive engine. Is he good enough to go for a Gold Cup? Is he classy enough? Perhaps he is. I wonder, could he start off in the Drinmore, perhaps in Fairyhouse, because he'd be still a novice at that stage. But it'll be very interesting to see where they go. Does he end up going for a Grand National? As we said, jumping is not as important as it used to be, and he stays forever. So is he going Gold Cup or Grand National? We'll see.
Yeah, I suppose I'm a big fan of Spillans Tower. I felt last year with Spillans Tower they were kind of lining him up for a handicap all year, and then he almost kind of just kept winning and kept progressing, and they kind of almost were forced into their hand of running in a Grade 1 at the end of the season. for all of them, and I know the way you're thinking, won a grade one at Aintree. If out of all 5 of those horses, he'd be the one horse I couldn't have in the slightest in open grade one company. He was obviously very well handicapped. He was, he won the Kim Muir pulling a cart, but he won a grade one where the pace collapsed with Chianti Classico going too quickly at Aintree. And he's jumping. Like, you can't underestimate, as Gavin said there, how good Derek O'Connor was on him. Like, this horse goes up to fences as if I was going up to a fence. He wants to jump it just as much as I do. So I couldn't have him. I'd have Spillane Tower as a much better prospect going forward than him.
Corbett's Cross?
Again, his jumping would be a little bit sceptical for me, but no doubt the engine's there.
Is that a fair assessment, Gavin?
Yeah, I think it is. Spillane Tower, going back to the day when he beat Blood Destiny at Punchestown. I think that was 2.5 that day, wasn't it? But I think Mark Walsh in Connections got a surprise about how he ended up winning that race. They dropped him back to 2 miles in Navan. He then wins at Fairyhouse and then at Punchestown. So he's a cracking horse. It's great for Jimmy Mangan. So yeah, it'll be very interesting to see where these horses all go. There'll be a lot of thought put into it, that's for sure.
Willie's got a couple of them, and one of the big stories last year was Willie Mullins winning the British Trainers' Championship as a proud Brit. It was slightly sick in the mouth stuff, the fact that Willie came over, probably only won 20 races all season in Britain and still won our Trainers' Championship. That's how dominant he is. I'm hoping, as a patriotic man, that one of the British trainers can regain that crown this year. We've got Paul Nicholls, Nicky Henderson and Dan Skelton. Very briefly, out of those trainers, which one do you think poses the biggest threat to a Willie Mullins?
I think it always has to be Paul Nicholls, really, when you look at the amount he's got and the amount he continues to invest year on year. Dan Skelton had an excellent season at a fantastic Cheltenham, which really put him in the mix. I don't think it's going to be long till he's in that category as well. But no, Nicholls has to be the one. Nicky Henderson's, obviously, he's got a few fantastic horses, but he does seem to specialise a lot more in quality rather than quantity these days.
Gavin?
Just to keep you happy, Josh, I know that you love Paul Nicholls, so I'll say him just to keep you happy. And here's one for you. Last year, obviously, usually there's 28 races at Cheltenham. We had the cross-country abandoned. There was 27 races. And here's a market for you for next March. Top trainer, Willie Mullins, Ireland, the rest of Ireland, or Britain, because last year it finished with 3 9s. So if you got 3 7 to 4s, it'd be an interesting market. Rather than having Ireland at 10s on or whatever it'll be, why not Willie Mullins, the rest of Ireland and Britain? Because last year it would have been a 3-way dead heat.
Absolutely, it would have. Yeah, that would have been fascinating. I think it'd be Dan Skelton.
Okay.
I think Nicky Henderson has 2 or 3 real superstars in John Bon and Constitution Hill, but I don't think he's got enough horses that are going to win on the Saturdays outside of those horses running, and therefore I think he'll struggle. I think Paul is actually lacking a real superstar. Brave Man's Game's getting on. Colwell Potter's going to be a novice, so the prize money in the novice division isn't great, and I think he's a kind of 2.5 miler as well, so that Cheltenham Festival race will be out of the window for him. I think he might struggle to have that real superstar, whether Dan Skelton has got Grey Dawning, who I can see featuring in all of those big 3-mile grade ones over here, especially. I think he could go and win a Betfair Chase. I think he could feature heavily in a King George. And Dan's just got so much depth as well now. Langer Dans of the world, I think, will go up to the 3-mile grade 1 after the rating. I think he'll have to. Unexpected Party's going to feature in there. He's got good novices coming through. So for me, I think Dan Skelton will cement his place there as well.
I just always feel over the last couple of years, it's when you think Paul Nicholls is a little bit vulnerable is the one time you should be very scared of him, because he'll find ways of winning every handicap at Cheltenham before, the festival and stuff like that. He'll have the likes of Stage Star winning races you won't believe he'll be winning. So yeah, I can see your point, but I would always beware of Paul.
The most worrying part for Britain really is the fact that there was 14 grade 1s at Cheltenham last season, and they won 2 of them, which was Protectorat, who's turning 10, and Grey Dawning as well. So it's just it's not encouraging from that side.
Gavin, if we were going to put you on the spot for 2 horses to follow outside of the top 5 trainers in the UK and Ireland, would you have a couple?
I have to check my notes here because I won't remember all the details. I'm getting too old. So I have 2 for you in Ireland and 2 for you trained in Britain. One is called Mozzie's Sister, trained by Declan Queally. Brought down at a point-to-point, won a point-to-point by 12, won a bumper in Cork by 12. Finished second to Familiar Dreams in Punchestown. Familiar Dreams was the best horse, looked across the track in front, but that didn't really matter. But she's still a very good horse. And since then, Mozzie's sister, 3 weeks ago, won from a horse of Paul Burns that was heavily punted into even money favourite. And she was giving away £10 to the 4-year-old. She's 5. So I think Mozzie's sister, Declan Queally, has said that it's the best horse that's been through his hands at the yard. So I think she could win a few races. The next one is Don't Stop the Music, trained by the brilliant Martin Brazel. 7-year-old gelding, so he's obviously had his problems that he's only a 7-year-old. He's a 7-year-old, still only having ran bumpers, etc. Did run in a maiden hurdle at 33-1, was second in a bumper, and then absolutely bolted up in Punchestown by 6 lengths in what I thought was a decent enough bumper. So don't be surprised if Don't Stop the Music, I don't know, could end up in a Coral Cup or one of those perhaps next March, but he looks to be a very nice horse. Horse trained by Tom Lacey is Tune in a Box, 5-year-old grey gelding, 4 out of 5 in handicaps, absolutely sluiced in Punchestown in that new race they have, 2.5 mile handicap. There was 24 in it, won by 8 lengths, had an Irish rating that day of 108, is now up to a UK rating of 123, but judged by the way it won so easy, or that he won so easy, 2.5 3 miles, Tune in a Box I think could win again. And the last one is Queensbury Boy, a 5-year-old gelding trained by Harry Durham. Won a point to point, won a bumper in Chepstow, came over to Punchestown, finished second to Wingman, trained by Gordon Elliott, who right-handed I think is a very good horse. Queensbury Boy, ridden by David Maxwell, so you have to allow for that in the price and the riding and everything, although I think David Maxwell is a legend. Queensbury Boy was 7 lengths clear of the Passing Wife. That had been a close enough second to Redemption Day. Redemption Day, as we know, went on to win the Grade 1. And the Passing Wife went on to win 2 bumpers over the summer, including the winner's bumper Galway. So I think Queensbury Boy, particularly if David Maxwell is injured, is definitely worth following.
Very good. Yeah, no, those are definitely 4 horses we'll all be keeping on side. I suppose finally, Gavin, so many people will know you from the Ante days, obviously all the stuff you do now for your own service about Ante Post betting, looking ahead. Been an awful lot of talk the last couple of years about Ante Post betting, how it's gotten an awful lot more difficult than it perhaps was 3 or 4 years ago. I suppose, would you have any pointers? Are there any particular markets that you look at, whether it's even at Cheltenham, whether it's on a week-to-week basis, that you feel there might still be that little bit of kind of squeeze that you can get out of them?
I think because it's only September, I think I would anyway try and stick to horses that are definitely going to a particular race. There's absolutely no point in backing Jasmine DeVoe to win the Supreme at 12-1 and the Ballymore just in case it goes there. You think you can tell your friends that's a 12-1 winner, but it's not. It's not even a 6-1 winner. It's an 11-2 winner. So I would stick to races at the moment for the next month or whatever. I've had no bet for Cheltenham, first time ever that in September I've had no bet. I think the value is getting trickier each year, as you said. I would generally try and stick at this stage maybe to mares races because you can kind of have an idea that they're going to go there. Just like 3-1 Maureen for the mare's novice hurdle, like that's a scandalous price, really, isn't it? Now she's a lovely horse, and I think she could be a star, but it's 14-1 bar, so perhaps there's a bit of value there. Golden Ace is 10-1. Jade de Grugy is half price at 5-1. Very, very impressive. I think it's an underrated horse. Won well at Cheltenham. The only thing is you have to remember that she was getting £5 from second, third, and fourth. So, but has won over the trip at Cheltenham since. But then again, you're at nothing if Lossiemouth goes to the mare's hurdle because she'd bolt up and she'd be odds on to do so. And in the mare's chase, Brighter Days Ahead hasn't jumped a fence yet, but she's 3-1 to win the mare's chase. But she does look a class apart. She looked exceptional in Aintree. She's to beat Limerick Lace. The one thing you're saying that there might be a few more changes. I really, really hope that they can make changes for the Grade 2 mare's novice hurdle and the mare's chase. Last year, both winners were receiving £5 from the second, and I just don't know, does that mean did the best horse win in the day? Perhaps not. So I'd love to see those 2 races at level weights personally.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Gavin. It's been a real treat to have you on the podcast. We do hope the viewers enjoyed. For those who want to follow all your work this season, feel free to plug what you'll be doing.
I just check out gavinlynchracing.com and have a look. Yeah, third year, very enjoyable. Plenty of videos, particularly from November on. I try and pick out each week eye catchers in Irish maiden hurdles and handicaps, etc. that might be worth following during the season.
there we go. We do hope that you can go over and check out Gavin's website if you're not already a part of it. Thank you so much, Gavin. It's been an absolute pleasure. If you did enjoy this video, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and we'll see you soon.